Chapter 1. The Bitter Resentment. Lynn sat on the balcony of her modest apartment in Los Angeles, staring out at the endless horizon, her thoughts tangled in a web of resentment. The city was bustling below her, but she felt isolated, disconnected from the world. The cool breeze blew through her hair, but the emptiness inside her heart was unaffected by the beauty of the evening sky. For years, she had been haunted by the same question: why didn't my mother stay with my father? It was a question that had gnawed at her since childhood, a question that fueled her anger toward the one person who was always there for her, her mother, Min. Lynn had never understood why her mother had chosen to leave her father, why she had chosen a life of struggle over the comfortable, affluent life that she could have had. She had always envied her friends, the ones who lived in big houses with fancy cars, the ones who had the luxury of enjoying weekends at resorts and vacations overseas. She, on the other hand, grew up in a cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet, watching as her mother worked long hours to provide for them both. Her father, on the other hand, had been a distant memory. He was a successful businessman who lived in a mansion, always busy with work, rarely available for family matters. He and her mother had divorced when she was young, and Lynn never saw him much after that. But as she grew older, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life could have been different if only her mother had chosen to stay with him. If only she had stayed, I wouldn't have to live like this. Her resentment had festered over the years, turning into a bitterness that clouded her view of everything. Whenever her mother tried to talk to her about her father, Lynn would shut her out. "Why are you always defending him?" she would yell. "He's never even tried to be part of my life." But what Lynn didn't realize was that her mother was only trying to protect her. Min had never spoken ill of her ex-husband to Lynn, but deep down, she knew the truth. She had left for Lynn's own good, to shield her from a life where material wealth was valued over love, and where emotional neglect was a constant. Lynn's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing on the table beside her. It was a message from her mother, a simple text that read, "How are you, Lynn? I miss you." Lynn's heart hardened as she stared at the message. She hadn't spoken to her mother in days. The last time they spoke, Lynn had argued with her, accusing her of being weak for staying in a life of poverty. She had told her mother that if she had stayed with her father, they would have had everything. Her mother had just sighed, her voice trembling as she responded, "I did what I thought was best for us." Now, as Lynn read her mother's text, she felt the sting of guilt, but she pushed it away. "Why should I feel bad?" she thought. "She chose this life. I didn't ask for it." It was easy for Lynn to cast the blame on her mother, to point out all the things she didn't have: luxuries, opportunities, and the affection she so desperately longed for. But in reality, it was her own bitterness, her refusal to understand, that had kept her from seeing the sacrifice her mother had made. As she tapped the phone, her mind wandered back to her father, the man she had barely seen in the last few years. Despite his wealth, he hadn't tried to reach out to her. It had always been her mother making the effort, despite everything. Lynn had to admit to herself that she didn't really know who her father was anymore. All she knew was that he had money, and that seemed to be the only thing that mattered. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She sighed, put the phone down, and walked over to answer it. To her surprise, it was a delivery man holding a small package. "This is for Lynn," he said, handing it over with a polite smile. Lynn accepted the package, wondering who could have sent it. She hadn't ordered anything. As she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a photo album. At first, she thought it was a mistake, but as she flipped it open, she realized that it was filled with pictures of her and her mother when she was a child. There were images of her first birthday, her first day of school, family outings, and other memories she had long forgotten. The last page of the album held a note in her mother's handwriting. "No matter how far apart we are, you will always be my daughter." Please remember that I love you no matter what. Lynn's heart ached. The walls she had built around herself started to crack. She closed the album slowly, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down, she missed her mother. She missed the warmth of her presence, the sacrifices she had made. But Lynn was too proud, too stubborn to admit her feelings. She turned away from the album and wiped her eyes, trying to push the emotions back down. I'll call her later, she thought, but not now. Not yet. As she set the album aside, she glanced at the time. It was late, and the day had been long. But despite her exhaustion, Lynn knew that something had shifted within her, something she couldn't quite explain. She didn't know how. But somewhere in her heart, a seed of doubt had been planted. Could it be possible that I've been wrong all along? With a sigh, Lynn closed the door and leaned against it, her mind racing with questions, but no answers. The bitterness still lingered, but now there was a crack in the armor she had built over the years. A crack that, perhaps, would one day let the light of understanding in. But not today. Today, Lynn was still too angry. Still too proud. Chapter 2. The call that changed everything. The days following Lynn's discovery of the photo album were a blur. She couldn't bring herself to talk to her mother, though the guilt gnawed at her every waking moment. The album lay untouched on the table, a silent reminder of all that had been buried for so long. She had told herself she would call her mother soon, but the words never came. Every time she picked up the phone, she would set it back down, overwhelmed by the unresolved anger still festering in her heart. But one evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, trying to bury herself in work, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed her mother's name. For a moment, Lynn just stared at the screen, frozen. She knew she should answer, but her chest tightened with dread. Reluctantly, she swiped to answer, her voice shaky as she said, "Hello?" Lynn, her mother's voice was soft but strained. "I need you to listen carefully. I've been feeling very unwell. The doctors say it's serious." Lynn's stomach dropped. "What's happening, Mom? Are you okay?" "I'm not sure, darling. But I've been trying to get a diagnosis for weeks. It's not good." Her voice faltered. A cold knot twisted in Lynn's stomach. Her mind raced back to their last conversation, the one where she had stormed off, leaving her mother to deal with her own health. Her mind flashed to the guilt she had pushed aside so easily. Now it came crashing in, a tidal wave of regret and remorse. "I'm coming to see you," Lynn said, her voice softening. "I'll be there soon." "Okay, just wait for me." There was a brief pause, and then her mother spoke again. "Lynn, I think it's time for you to come back home." The words hit Lynn like a blow to the chest. Home. It had been years since she had called it that. The bitterness that had clouded her thoughts seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a stirring of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. "I'll come," Lynn whispered, her throat tight. The next day, Lynn found herself back at the apartment she once shared with her mother, though it felt so foreign to her now. The small, cozy space seemed dimmer, the air heavier. Her mother was lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and drawn. "Mom," Lynn said, kneeling by her side. "Why didn't you tell me you were so sick?" Her mother smiled weakly, reaching out to brush Lynn's hair from her face. "I didn't want you to worry, sweetheart. I wanted you to live your life, to focus on your future. You have so much ahead of you." Lynn's heart ached as she took her mother's hand. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to fully feel the depth of the love between them, the love her mother had never stopped giving, even when Lynn had been too blind to see it. That night, as she lay in bed, Lynn's mind wandered back to her father, the man who had always been distant, the man who had never truly cared about her, or so she had thought. The next morning, Lynn received a call from an unknown number. She answered reluctantly. "It's your father," the voice on the other end said, sounding colder than she remembered. "I've heard about your mother's condition." Lynn's pulse quickened. "What do you want, Dad?" she asked, her voice clipped, guarded. "I want you to come back to me," her father said, his tone calculating. "I can offer you everything you ever wanted. A life of comfort, wealth, power. I'll take care of you, Lynn. It's time for you to stop living like this." Lynn's heart raced. The words were exactly what she had been longing to hear for years. She felt her resentment bubble up, her desire to escape the life she'd built with her mother. But then a chill ran down her spine. There was something in his tone, something that didn't sit right. She paused. "Why do you want me now?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Her father's voice grew more insistent. "Because, Lynn, I need you. There's something very important you can do for me. You don't have to worry about anything. Just come back. You'll see. Everything will be better." Something about his words fell off, and Lynn's instincts screamed at her to be cautious. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice low. After hanging up, Lynn couldn't shake the unease that gripped her. She had always known her father to be driven by ambition and wealth, but now his words carried a darker tone. He wasn't asking to reconnect. He was asking for something more. Days passed, and Lynn tried to focus on caring for her mother, but her mind kept drifting back to that conversation. What did he want from her? Why did he need her back in his life now after all these years? Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her father. "I need to talk to you in person. Come to my house. I'll explain everything." Lynn stared at the screen, feeling a sense of dread creeping over her. The offer seemed too good to be true, but she didn't know what else to do. After a few minutes of internal conflict, she made a decision. She would go. But what she didn't know yet was that this visit would be the turning point that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family. Chapter 3. The Unraveling Truth. The drive to her father's mansion felt surreal. As Lynn navigated through the sprawling streets of Beverly Hills, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. All her life, she had dreamed of returning to this life of wealth and comfort, but now that it was within her reach, something didn't sit right. Her instincts told her to turn around, to return to the safety and simplicity of her mother's home. But she couldn't. The temptation to finally be the daughter her father had always wanted her to be was too strong. As she pulled up to the grand gate of her father's estate, a familiar chill ran through her. The house loomed before her, impressive and sterile, with manicured lawns and extravagant architecture. It was a place that felt more like a museum than a home. She parked her car and hesitated before walking up to the front door. The house was quiet, eerily quiet, as if no one really lived there. As she rang the doorbell, her mind raced with questions. What did her father need from her? Why now, after all these years of neglect? The door opened slowly, and there he was, her father. A man who had always been more of a distant figure in her life than a real parent. He looked the same, tall, impeccably dressed, and commanding, but his face was colder than she remembered. "Lynn," he said, his voice smooth and businesslike. "Come in." She stepped inside, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over her. The interior of the mansion was pristine, yet impersonal. Every room designed to impress, but lacking warmth. It felt like a place where people existed but didn't really live. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a plush sofa in the living room. His tone was stern. Not welcoming, but there was an unmistakable urgency behind it. Lynn hesitated but sat down. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding his gaze, her heart pounding with anxiety. Her father settled into a chair across from her, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about you, Lynn," he began, his voice colder than she remembered. "And I've come to a conclusion. You're my daughter, and it's time for you to come back to me." Lynn's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? I'm here, but why now? After all this time, why do you suddenly want me back?" He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. It's not just about us reconnecting, Lynn. There's something I need from you. Something very important. Lynn's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? Her father's gaze hardened. My son, your half-brother, Nam, he's sick. He needs a kidney transplant, and you're the only one who can help him. The doctors say you're a match. Lynn froze, the words hitting her like a punch to the stomach. What? You want me to donate my kidney to him? She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Exactly. He said matter-of-factly. It's simple. You'll save his life, and in return, I'll take care of everything. You'll never have to worry about money again. You'll get everything you've ever wanted. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Lynn felt like the floor had dropped out from under her, her heart pounding in her chest. Her father, the man who had never cared for her, the man who had abandoned her mother and her, was now asking her to sacrifice something as precious as her own life for his new family. A cold rage bubbled up inside her. This is what he wanted all along. She had been nothing more than a pawn in his world of wealth and power. Her father didn't care about her or her life. He only cared about what she could do for him. Lynn stood abruptly, her voice shaking with fury. No, I'm not doing this. You want me to come back, to be part of your life, and then you want to use me to save your other child? What kind of father are you? Her father didn't flinch. Lynn, this is not up for debate. You've always wanted this, everything I can give you. All you have to do is help me with this one thing. She shook her head, disbelief washing over her. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. You didn't even want me when I was a child. You abandoned me. And now you think you can just call me up and ask me for this? You think I'll just drop everything and do what you say? Her father remained silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder than ever. I'm offering you a way to be part of this family. This is your chance to have what you've always wanted. If you don't take it, then you'll be nothing to me. You're either with us, or you're not. Lynn's chest tightened. This isn't what I thought it would be. The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time in her life, Lynn realized just how much she had been craving her father's approval. She had wanted him to love her, to care about her the way he cared for his new family. But it had all been a lie. With her heart racing, she turned and walked toward the door. I'm leaving. I'm not your pawn, and I'm certainly not going to sacrifice myself for you or your new family. As she stepped out into the cold, crisp air, Lynn felt like she was finally seeing her father for who he truly was, a man who valued wealth and power over love and family. She didn't look back as she drove away, her heart torn and broken. But in that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. She wasn't going to let her father's cruel expectations define her. She was done. But as she drove back to her mother's home, the guilt from leaving still gnawed at her. She knew the decision had been necessary, but a part of her still yearned for the connection she had always dreamed of. And yet, in her heart, Lynn knew that the only person who had truly ever loved her was her mother. She just had to find a way to make things right. Chapter 4. The Return to the Roots. The drive back to her mother's apartment was a blur. Lynn's mind was consumed by the conversation with her father, replaying every word he had said. You're either with us, or you're not. The words echoed in her ears like a haunting melody, reminding her of the distance that had always existed between her and the man who should have been her father. He never cared about me. Lynn's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Her thoughts tangled in the conflicting emotions that surged within her. She had made the right decision. She had to leave. But the part of her that had always longed for her father's affection still lingered, like an open wound she couldn't heal. When she pulled up to her mother's apartment, the familiar sight of the humble building felt almost foreign. She had spent so many years running from it, avoiding the warmth and simplicity it offered. But now, as she stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: relief. Her mother was sitting on the couch when Lynn walked in, her face still pale but more at ease than it had been when Lynn first left. There was something different about the atmosphere now. The space that had once felt too small, too confining, now seemed like a sanctuary. "Mom," Lynn said, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't know how to start. She had so much to say, but the words stuck in her throat. Her mother looked up, her eyes softening as she saw Lynn standing in the doorway. For a moment, there was silence, and then, without a word, her mother opened her arms. Lynn didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and collapsed into her mother's embrace, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Lynn sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I've been so blind. I didn't understand. I didn't understand anything." Her mother didn't say anything at first, but she gently ran her fingers through Lynn's hair, soothing her. "It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to apologize. I know you were angry. I know you didn't understand why I did what I did. But I've always loved you." Lynn's heart ached as she clung to her mother, the weight of the past years crashing down on her. She had been angry for so long, angry at her mother for making the choices she had. But now all that anger seemed so foolish, so small in the face of the love her mother had shown her despite everything. "I was so angry, Mom," Lynn whispered, her voice shaking. "I kept blaming you for everything, for not giving me the life I thought I deserved. I didn't see what you gave me, what you sacrificed for me." Her mother's voice was soft, but filled with wisdom. "Sometimes the things that matter most aren't the things we can see, Lynn. It's the love, the care, the sacrifices we make for the people we love. I did what I thought was best for us. I didn't want you to grow up thinking that money was the most important thing. I wanted you to understand that love, family, and happiness are more valuable than anything else." Lynn pulled back, looking into her mother's eyes, the truth finally sinking in. "This is where I belong." Her mother had always been there for her, even when she couldn't see it. Everything her mother had done had been out of love, even when Lynn had rejected it. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Lynn whispered again, her voice full of regret. "I've been so lost in wanting things I thought would make me happy. But all I really needed was you." Her mother smiled faintly, brushing the hair from Lynn's forehead. "I've always been here for you, darling. I will always be here no matter what." For the first time in years, Lynn felt a sense of peace. The weight that had hung around her chest for so long, the burden of resentment and bitterness, seemed to lift. She didn't need her father's approval anymore. She didn't need the wealth or the luxury he offered. What mattered was the bond between her and her mother, the love that had always been there, waiting for her to recognize it. As the night settled in, Lynn and her mother sat together, talking for hours. They shared memories, laughed, and cried. And in the midst of it all, Lynn realized that the healing process had already begun. But just as the night was drawing to a close, her phone buzzed again. Lynn looked at the screen, her heart sinking when she saw the name. It was her father. She hesitated before answering, but she knew she had to face him. He had been a part of her life for so long, and even though she had made the decision to walk away, she couldn't keep avoiding the reality of their relationship. Taking a deep breath, Lynn answered the phone. "What do you want, Dad?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before her father's voice came through, cold as ever. "Lynn, I've been thinking. I still want you back. I know what happened at the house was hard, but we can fix this. You can still be a part of this family. We can make this work." Lynn's heart pounded in her chest. The offer was tempting, but she was no longer that lost girl who had sought her father's approval. She had found something far more valuable. She had found herself. "No, Dad," Lynn said firmly. "I'm not coming back. I don't want your money, and I don't want to be part of your world. I have my own life now, and I'm going to live it on my own terms." Her father's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. But Lynn didn't wait for him to respond. She ended the call, setting the phone down with a deep breath of relief. When she turned to look at her mother, she saw the understanding in her eyes. She had made the right choice. In the end, it wasn't the wealth or the status that mattered. It was the love, the forgiveness, and the healing that would allow her to finally move forward. Lynn had chosen the only thing that mattered, a life filled with love and the strength to live it authentically. The journey wasn't over, but it was only just beginning. Chapter 5. Rebuilding and Rediscovery. The days after her confrontation with her father passed slowly, each one bringing Lynn closer to a sense of peace she had never known. She had made the decision to turn away from the empty promises of wealth and security her father had offered, choosing instead to focus on what truly mattered: healing, rebuilding, and finding herself again. Lynn spent her days with her mother, the two of them rekindling their bond with every passing hour. They cooked meals together, took walks in the nearby park, and shared stories from the past that Lynn had long forgotten. It was as though they were starting fresh, building a new chapter of their lives, one based on love and mutual respect. But even as Lynn embraced the comfort of her mother's love, there was a lingering feeling within her that she couldn't ignore. She had spent so much of her life chasing after things that didn't matter, and now that she had finally let go of that pursuit, she realized there was a deeper part of herself that she still needed to discover. She had to find out what truly made her happy, what truly fulfilled her beyond the expectations placed on her by others. One morning, while sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea, Lynn's mother asked her a question that surprised her. "Have you thought about what you want to do now, Lynn? With your life, I mean. You've always been so focused on pleasing others, but now you have the chance to do something for yourself." Lynn took a deep breath, considering the question carefully. What did she want? For the first time in years, the possibilities seemed endless. She could finally pursue her passions, explore what truly made her happy, and most importantly, she could build a future that was entirely her own. "I don't know yet, Mom," Lynn admitted, "but I do know that I don't want to keep running. I've spent so much time trying to live up to other people's expectations, but I want to live for myself now. I want to find something that gives me purpose." Her mother smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "That's all I've ever wanted for you, Lynn. To find your own path and to be happy with it." Lynn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. She wasn't bound by the expectations of her father, her peers, or even her own resentments. She could finally breathe, without the burden of trying to be someone she wasn't. But as time went on, Lynn realized that the journey of rediscovery wasn't easy. There were days when she felt lost, unsure of where to start or what direction to take. The world seemed so vast and the choices endless. She had to learn to trust herself again, to listen to her instincts, and to let go of the fear of failure that had held her back for so long. One afternoon, as Lynn was walking through a local bookstore, a small flyer caught her eye. It was a sign for a writing workshop, an opportunity to learn how to write personal stories and memoirs. A spark of inspiration flickered inside her, and she immediately felt drawn to it. She had always loved writing, but she had never thought of it as a career or something she could pursue seriously. But now, in this moment, something inside her clicked. Perhaps this was the path she had been searching for. Lynn signed up for the workshop, and soon she found herself immersed in the world of storytelling. She discovered a new way to express herself, to share her experiences, and to process the emotions she had buried for so long. Writing became a form of therapy for her, a way to understand the complexities of her own life and the relationships that had shaped her. As weeks passed, Lynn's confidence grew. She began to write more frequently, sharing her stories with her workshop group. The feedback was positive, and she began to develop a style that felt authentic to her. She was finally expressing herself in a way she had never done before. The sense of fulfillment she had long sought began to take shape. Through her writing, Lynn began to realize the power of vulnerability, the importance of sharing her truth, even when it was difficult. She had spent so many years hiding behind walls, too afraid to let anyone see the parts of her that had been broken. But now, through her words, she could finally release that pain and begin to heal. One evening, after a particularly moving writing session, Lynn sat on the couch with her mother, a sense of peace settling over her. "I think I'm starting to figure it out, Mom," she said softly. "I'm starting to understand who I really am." Her mother smiled, her pride evident in her eyes. "I've always known you had it in you, Lynn. You're stronger than you think." Lynn nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her mother's unwavering support. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Her mother reached out, squeezing her hand. "I'm just glad you found your way. You deserve to be happy." That night, as Lynn lay in bed, she thought about how far she had come. The path hadn't been easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in years, Lynn felt at peace with who she was. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone anymore. She didn't need to chase after wealth or status. What mattered was that she had found a way to reconnect with her true self. Lynn had learned that healing wasn't a destination, it was a process. And in this moment, she realized that the journey was just as important as the destination itself. Her story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Years later, Lynn would look back on this chapter of her life with gratitude. She had taken the lessons learned from her struggles, her family, and her journey towards self-discovery and built a life filled with meaning and purpose. Her writing had blossomed into a successful career, and she used her platform to inspire others who had faced similar challenges. Most importantly, Lynn had learned to forgive herself, to embrace her flaws, and to let go of the expectations that had held her back for so long. Her relationship with her mother remained strong, and together, they continued to share a bond that no one could break. And as for her father, Lynn had long since let go of the bitterness she once held toward him. She had made her peace with the past, and now she lived for the future. A future where she was free to be herself, to pursue her passions, and to love without conditions. In the end, Lynn had discovered that true happiness didn't come from the things she once thought she wanted. It came from within, through the acceptance of who she truly was and the courage to live authentically. And that was enough. Chapter 6: Embracing the New Path. Lynn's life had taken on a rhythm of its own in the years following her decision to pursue writing. She had found peace in her work, in the stories she shared, and in the way her voice resonated with others. The workshop she had joined became a stepping stone to a new chapter, one that opened doors she had never imagined. Her memoir, Beyond the Walls, had become a success, touching the hearts of countless readers. It was raw, honest, and full of vulnerability, just like Lynn. The book explored her journey from resentment to healing, the fractures within her family, and the ultimate rediscovery of her worth. It wasn't just a story about her. It was a story about anyone who had ever struggled with family, identity, and finding a place in the world. Lynn's writing began to shift the way she viewed the world around her. She no longer saw things through the narrow lens of what others expected her to be. Instead, she looked at the world as a writer, someone who could create her own narrative, one filled with her own truth. As her book gained recognition, Lynn received invitations to speak at conferences, interviews with publications, and even offers from other writers seeking mentorship. She had become a voice of inspiration for those navigating their own struggles, those who had spent years running from their pasts, hiding from their true selves, just as she once had. But despite the success, Lynn remained humble, grounded in the love she shared with her mother. The bond between them had only deepened, and they continued to support each other as they had always done. Her mother had seen Lynn through every trial, every failure, and every triumph. It was her quiet strength that had helped Lynn become the woman she was today. One afternoon, as Lynn sat at her favorite cafe, sipping her coffee and writing her next chapter, she received a call. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it piqued her curiosity. Hesitant at first, she answered. "Lynn?" The voice on the other end was familiar, though she hadn't heard it in years. It was her father. A wave of emotion rushed through Lynn, but she steadied herself. It had been a long time since she had last spoken to him, since she had closed that door on him. She had made peace with her decision, but hearing his voice still carried weight. "Dad," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What is it?" "I know it's been a while," her father's voice came through, tinged with an unfamiliar humility. "I've been thinking a lot about you and the things I said, the things I did. I know I wasn't the father you needed me to be, and I've made a lot of mistakes." Lynn took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where she could finally hear the apology she had longed for. But she wasn't sure she needed it anymore. "Why are you calling now?" Lynn asked softly, her emotions still raw. "I've been going through some changes in my life. I realize now how much I've hurt you, how much I've taken you for granted. And I want to make things right, at least between us. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm hoping we can try to rebuild what was broken." Lynn sat back, her mind racing. This was the father she had always wanted, the one who was finally acknowledging the mistakes he had made. But there was a part of her that had already let go of the need for his approval. She had built a life without him, a life that was hers alone. "I appreciate you reaching out, Dad," Lynn said, her voice steady but emotional. "But I'm not the same person I was when I left. I've healed in ways I didn't think were possible. And while I can't forget what happened, I've come to understand that forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when her father spoke again, his voice was softer, almost wistful. "I understand, Lynn. I really do. I'm proud of who you've become. And I'm sorry for not being there for you when you needed me. If there's ever a time when you're ready, I'd like to be a part of your life again. But no matter what, I'll always be here." Lynn felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't from anger or hurt. It was a tear of release, a tear of finality. She had forgiven him, not because he had asked for it, but because she had let go of the burden she had carried for so long. "I'll think about it," Lynn said quietly. "But right now, I'm living the life I've always needed to live, and I'm okay with that." She hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment, allowing the weight of the conversation to settle within her. There was no more need for resentment. No more need to carry the anger of her past. She had let go, and in doing so, she had found peace. Chapter 7. The Future Ahead. As Lynn moved forward, her life continued to flourish. She found herself writing more than ever, her words reaching people across the world. She began to teach writing workshops, sharing the lessons she had learned along the way. Her story became one of resilience and transformation, showing that it was never too late to change, to heal, and to find happiness on your own terms. Her relationship with her mother remained a cornerstone of her life. They traveled together, explored new places, and continued to build memories. The bond between them was unshakable, grounded in the love and support that had always been there, even when Lynn hadn't recognized it. Lynn's journey had been long and, at times, difficult, but it had been her own. She had learned that happiness wasn't something to be found outside of herself. It was something that grew from within, from the courage to face the past, to heal, and to embrace the future with open arms. And as she stood on the brink of new adventures, Lynn knew that her story wasn't over yet. She was still writing it, one chapter at a time, carving out a life that was truly hers, one of purpose, love, and self-discovery. In the end, It was not the approval of others that mattered. It was the peace she had found within herself. And for the first time in her life, Lynn was finally free to live her truth. Chapter 8. The Power of New Beginnings. Lynn's life continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. Her writing career had reached new heights, and her work began to resonate with an even broader audience. She had grown from a woman defined by her past to one who was creating a future based on her own terms. The workshops she led were not just about writing, they were about healing, about finding one's voice, about giving others the tools to tell their stories, just as she had found her own. With every class she taught, Lynn saw the same transformation she had experienced in herself. Her students came to her with stories of pain, of family struggles, and of self-doubt. They came searching for the same thing she had once sought, answers, a way out of the shadows of their pasts. And just like her, they learned that the first step to healing was telling their stories. One afternoon, as Lynn stood before a group of eager writers, she paused to let the weight of her own words sink in. She had just finished sharing a particularly moving passage from her latest book, one that chronicled the moment she had walked away from her father's mansion, the moment when she finally realized that her life was her own to define. She looked out at the faces in the room. Some were tear-streaked, others hopeful, but all were listening intently. It was a powerful moment, one that had become all too familiar to Lynn. A moment when words, when vulnerability, created a bridge from the past to the future. You see, she said, her voice steady and strong, it's not about perfect endings. It's about learning how to live fully, even with all the scars and bruises we carry. Because those scars, those experiences, are what make us who we are. And if we can learn to accept them, to love ourselves despite them, we become stronger. And we become free. After the session, as the students gathered their things and filed out, one woman lingered behind. Lynn recognized her as one of the quieter members of the group, a woman in her late 30s who had often kept to herself, rarely speaking but always listening. Lynn, the woman said softly. Her eyes filled with gratitude. I just wanted to thank you. Your story, it really helped me. I've been holding on to a lot of anger toward my family, but I think I'm ready to let it go now. Lynn smiled warmly. It's not easy, but it's worth it. You'll find peace in your own time. Just take it one step at a time. The woman nodded, wiping away a tear before turning to leave. Lynn stood in the quiet room for a moment, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. It was moments like this, moments where her own healing journey could help others, that reminded her why she had chosen this path. As Lynn continued to build her writing career, she also began to expand her horizons. She took trips to places she had always dreamed of visiting, places filled with history, culture, and new experiences. With her mother by her side, they traveled to quaint villages in Europe, basked in the ancient charm of Rome, and explored the tranquil beauty of Kyoto. These trips were not just vacations, they were opportunities for growth, for seeing the world through a new lens, and for embracing the unknown. During one of their trips, while walking through the bustling streets of Paris, Lynn found herself standing in front of a small bookstore tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It was an old, charming shop filled with books of all kinds, hardcover classics, poetry collections, novels, and memoirs. It was a place that felt like home. As she wandered through the aisles, she felt a strange sense of connection to the space. This was where her journey had begun. Here, among the books and the words, she had first discovered her voice. And now she was a part of that world, contributing her own stories to the vast sea of literature. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, marveling at the way the words seemed to leap off the pages. This is where I belong, she thought. This is the life I was meant to lead. Her mother joined her a few minutes later, and together they sat in a cozy corner of the bookstore, sipping coffee and discussing the novels they had found. For Lynn, these moments of connection, moments with her mother, with herself, and with the world around her, were the ones that made life meaningful. She no longer needed the approval of her father or anyone else. She had found her own path, and it was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 9. A Legacy of Love. Years passed, and Lynn's work continued to thrive. Her writing had touched countless lives, and her journey from resentment to healing had become a beacon of hope for those who felt lost, alone, or broken. She had found peace, and now she was passing that peace on to others through her words, her teaching, and her life. One evening, as Lynn sat in the quiet of her apartment, reflecting on how far she had come, she received a call from her mother. It had been a while since they had spoken on the phone. Her mother had been busy with her own projects, and Lynn had been wrapped up in her writing and teaching. "Lynn, I wanted to tell you something." Her mother's voice came through the phone, sounding unusually serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately about everything we've been through, and I just want you to know how proud I am of you. You've become such a strong, wonderful woman, and I couldn't be prouder to call you my daughter." Lynn's heart swelled with emotion. "Mom, you've always been the one who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You've been my rock." "I know," her mother said softly, "and I always will be. You're a part of me, Lynn, and nothing can change that." Lynn smiled, feeling the warmth of her mother's words wash over her. She had found her way back to her roots, to the love and support that had always been there, waiting for her to realize it. "Thank you, Mom," Lynn said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I love you, darling. Always have, always will." Lynn closed her eyes, allowing the love of her mother to fill her heart. The years of resentment, the pain, the distance, it was all behind her now. She had come full circle, and the life she had built was one of peace, love, and fulfillment. And as she looked ahead to the future, she knew that her journey wasn't over. There were still stories to tell, still lessons to learn, and still people to inspire. But one thing was certain: Lynn was exactly where she needed to be. In the end, it wasn't about the wealth or the approval of others. It was about love, the love she had found within herself, and the love she shared with those who mattered most. And that was more than enough. Chapter 10. Full Circle. Lynn's life had come to a place of quiet fulfillment. As the years unfolded, her professional success continued to grow. She had found herself in a place where her career as a writer and teacher no longer felt like a dream, but a reality she had crafted with her own hands. The lessons she had learned about resilience, healing, and embracing vulnerability had become the foundation of everything she did. Yet, even with all her accomplishments, Lynn had never lost sight of what truly mattered. The love and support she had with her mother, the relationships she had built, and the internal peace she had nurtured along her journey. One crisp fall morning, as Lynn walked through the city park near her apartment, she noticed a new sign on the community board. It was an advertisement for a writing contest, something that immediately piqued her interest. She had written and published books, but this contest was different. It was focused on stories about family, about the intricacies of relationships, the ties that bind, and the legacies we pass down. She stopped to read the details carefully. The prize was a substantial one, but what caught her eye was the mission behind the contest: to shine a light on stories that heal, that inspire, and that offer hope to others. Lynn felt a stir within her. This was more than just a contest. It was an opportunity to put into words the story she had lived, the one she had been telling in small pieces throughout her books and her life. She signed up almost immediately, and over the next few months, Lynn poured herself into the contest piece. The story she chose to write was one of deep reflection, the journey of a woman reclaiming her life, navigating the complexities of family, love, and self-worth. It was a story about herself, her mother, her father, and the road to healing she had traveled. As she wrote, she realized how far she had come and how deeply her experiences had shaped the woman she had become. The night before the contest deadline, Lynn sat at her desk, reviewing her work one last time. She had been writing and editing for weeks, revisiting the painful memories of her past. The moments of rage, sadness, and the slow, steady path toward forgiveness. But now, as she looked at the final draft, she felt a deep sense of pride. This story was a culmination of everything she had learned about herself, about love, and about the way people could heal one another. As she hit the submit button, a quiet sense of peace washed over her. It didn't matter whether she won the contest or not. She had already won by telling her story, by reclaiming her voice. The next few weeks were a blur of other commitments, writing workshops, book signings, and more time spent with her mother. But every now and then, she thought about the contest. She didn't let herself get consumed by the desire for validation she had already found that within herself. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what would come of it. Then, one afternoon, the email arrived. Lynn opened it hesitantly, and when she saw the subject line, "Congratulations, Lynn. You've won the family writing contest," her heart skipped a beat. She clicked on the message, and the first line read, "We are pleased to inform you that your story, Beyond the Walls, has been selected as the winner of this year's contest." A rush of emotion surged through her. She hadn't expected it, yet in some strange way, she had known that this was the final chapter of a journey that had begun years ago. Lynn sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. She had won not because of the accolades or the prize money, but because her story had resonated with others. It had spoken to the core of who she was, and in doing so, it had touched the hearts of people who had experienced similar struggles. The next few months were a whirlwind of media interviews, speaking engagements, and public appearances. Lynn felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she shared her story with others. But it wasn't the applause or the recognition that made the experience worthwhile. It was the personal letters, the messages of gratitude, and the stories from readers who had been moved by her words. These were the things that made Lynn feel as if her life had truly mattered. Chapter 11. A Legacy of Healing. Years passed, and Lynn's life continued to unfold beautifully. Her relationship with her mother remained one of the most important pillars of her existence. They had grown closer than ever, sharing more laughter, more adventures, and more quiet moments together. Lynn often reflected on how far they had come, how much they had healed from the pain of the past. Her writing career continued to flourish. Lynn had found her voice and her place in the literary world, but it wasn't just about success. It was about the impact she had on others, the way her words had served as a mirror for their own struggles, their own journeys. She became more than just a writer. She became a guide for others navigating the complicated waters of family, love, and self-discovery. And though her relationship with her father remained distant, Lynn no longer carried the burden of resentment that had once consumed her. She had come to understand that healing meant more than just letting go of anger. It was about accepting that not all relationships would be perfect, but that didn't mean they couldn't still have value. One afternoon, as Lynn sat by the window of her study, watching the light filter through the trees, she realized that she had created a life that was true to herself, a life that she had built from the ashes of her past. She had learned to forgive, to love, and to embrace her story without shame. And in doing so, she had discovered the power of her own resilience. Lynn had found the peace she had always been searching for. Not in the approval of others, not in wealth or recognition, but in the quiet moments of self-acceptance, in the love she had for herself and those who had supported her. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and smiled. This is my life. This is my legacy. And in that moment, Lynn knew that she had finally come full circle. Chapter 12, A New Chapter. As the years went by, Lynn's life continued to blossom in ways she had never anticipated. With each passing season, she found herself more at peace with her past, more connected to her present, and excited for what lay ahead in the future. The writing that had once been an escape had now become her purpose, a way of sharing her truth with others while inspiring them to do the same. Despite her success, Lynn never let the busyness of her career eclipse the importance of the relationships she had worked so hard to heal. Her bond with her mother remained as strong as ever. The two of them, in their own quiet way, had become a source of strength for one another, leaning on each other in times of joy and sorrow. The laughter they shared, the quiet dinners at home, and the simple, everyday moments had created a foundation of love that couldn't be shaken by anything. But life, as it always does, kept moving forward. Lynn's career reached a new level when she was invited to speak at a major international conference about personal healing and the power of storytelling. It was an opportunity she could never have imagined when she first started her journey, speaking to audiences of hundreds, sharing the story of how she had come to peace with her past, and how others could do the same. Standing before the crowd, Lynn felt a sense of calm she had never known. The nervousness she used to feel before public speaking had long since faded. Now, when she stood on stage, it wasn't about her. It was about the people in the audience, those who had come seeking the same healing she had once needed. As she shared her story, Lynn looked out over the faces of those who listened, some with tears in their eyes, others nodding in recognition. She felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was why she wrote. This was why she shared her story, to help others feel seen, heard, and understood. After the event, Lynn received dozens of messages from people who had been deeply moved by her words. Some shared their own stories of struggle, family pain, and healing, while others simply thanked her for being the voice they had never been able to find. It was these moments that affirmed the choice she had made years ago, to walk away from a life of resentment and to embrace one of vulnerability and connection. As she returned to her apartment that evening, Lynn reflected on the incredible journey she had undertaken. She had gone from a place of bitterness and confusion to one of clarity and purpose. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up, and she had done it in a way that felt authentic to her. Chapter 13, A Full Heart. One evening, Lynn and her mother sat on the balcony of their apartment, enjoying the peaceful sunset. It had become a routine they both cherished, these quiet moments of reflection, where they could simply be together without the noise of the outside world. "Mom," Lynn began, her voice soft, "do you ever think about how far we've come? How much has changed since all the pain we went through?" Her mother turned to look at her, a tender smile on her face. "I do, Lynn. I think about it often. I'm so proud of you, of everything you've accomplished. But most of all, I'm proud of the person you've become. You've learned to forgive, to heal, and to love both yourself and others." Lynn smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I've learned so much from you, Mom. You've always shown me what real strength is." Her mother chuckled softly. "Strength is learning to love when it's hard, and to stand tall even when the world around you seems uncertain. And you, my dear, have done just that. You've come through everything stronger than you know." Lynn leaned back in her chair, watching as the last of the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a beautiful evening, one that felt full of possibility. And in that moment, Lynn realized that there was so much more ahead of her. She had healed, but the journey of self-discovery would continue, forever unfolding as she learned more about herself and the world around her. Chapter 14, Passing on the Torch. With the success of her books and public speaking, Lynn knew that her work was far from over. But it wasn't just about her anymore, it was about giving back, passing on the lessons she had learned to others, and inspiring a new generation of writers and storytellers to share their voices. She started a mentorship program for aspiring writers, focusing on those from marginalized backgrounds, those who, like her, had struggled with self-doubt and the weight of family expectations. She wanted to give them the same opportunities she had to find their voice, to tell their stories, and to be proud of who they were. Over time, Lynn's mentorship program grew. She watched as her students began to flourish, finding their own confidence and discovering the power in their words. Some went on to publish their own books, while others became advocates for their communities, sharing their experiences and helping others find their way. It was a full-circle moment for Lynn, watching others take the tools she had given them and use them to create their own lives, their own futures. She had done it for herself, and now she was helping others do the same. It was a legacy of healing, one that would continue far beyond her own lifetime. As Lynn sat at her desk one evening, writing her next chapter, she reflected on the winding path that had brought her here. She thought about the woman she had been, the one who felt lost, bitter, and alone, and the woman she had become, the one who had healed, forgiven, and discovered her true voice. Her story was still unfolding. Every day, new experiences, new lessons, and new connections were added to the pages of her life. And she realized that was the beauty of it all. The journey was never really over. It was a process of continuous growth and transformation, of embracing each new chapter with an open heart and a willingness to learn. Lynn closed her laptop and looked out the window. The city was alive with energy, the streets bustling with people living their own stories. And in that moment, Lynn knew one thing for sure: her story was far from finished. The healing had begun, but the adventure of life, of discovery, of writing her own truth, was just beginning. And with that, Lynn smiled, ready for whatever came next. Chapter 15. New Beginnings. The days and months continued to pass, each bringing with it new layers of growth and understanding. Lynn's life, once dominated by uncertainty and the search for external validation, was now rooted in a deeper sense of self. She was more than the stories she told. She was the embodiment of them, someone who had endured, learned, and emerged stronger. Her mentorship program continued to flourish, and she poured her heart into the students who came to her for guidance. She saw herself in them, their uncertainty, their hesitation, and their hidden potential. Each time one of them published their first piece or spoke with newfound confidence about their story, Lynn felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She knew that she was doing more than just teaching writing. She was helping others find their voice, just as she had found hers. As her reputation as a mentor and writer grew, Lynn began to expand her reach. She was invited to host workshops abroad, to speak at universities, and to collaborate with organizations dedicated to providing platforms for underrepresented voices. Every opportunity felt like a validation of the work she had put in, both the work of writing and the work of healing. Yet, in the midst of the success, Lynn remained grounded in what mattered most. She spent quiet evenings with her mother, their conversations a source of comfort and connection. She relished the moments when they would sit side by side, with a cup of tea, watching the sunset, and reminiscing about their journey together. The past no longer held power over her. It was simply a part of the narrative, a chapter she had accepted and moved beyond. But it wasn't just her personal growth that was changing. Lynn had always felt a strong desire to give back, to create spaces where others could feel seen and heard. One evening, as she sat with her mother, an idea began to form in her mind. "Mom," Lynn said, her voice filled with excitement, "what if I started a foundation? Something that helps young people who have experienced the kind of struggles we did, young people who don't know where to turn or how to share their stories." Her mother's eyes lit up with warmth and pride. "That's a beautiful idea, Lynn. You've always wanted to make a difference. Now you can create a space where others can heal, just as you have." Lynn smiled, feeling the truth of her mother's words settle deep in her heart. She had found peace, but she also knew that peace wasn't just something to keep to herself. It was something to share, to spread to others who needed it. She spent the next few months researching, planning, and connecting with others who could help bring her vision to life. By the end of the year, the Lin Chong Foundation for Storytelling and Healing was born. The foundation's mission was clear: to empower young people from marginalized communities to find their voice through writing, to provide them with the resources and mentorship they needed to tell their stories, and to create a community where healing was possible. Chapter 16. Bridging the Gap. The foundation quickly became Lin's greatest passion. She spent her time not only writing but building something that would outlive her own story. She worked closely with the young people who came to the foundation, many of whom had suffered from similar challenges: broken family dynamics, self-doubt, and the struggle to find their place in the world. These young writers reminded Lin of herself when she had first begun her journey, lost, uncertain, and searching for a way out. One of the first major projects of the foundation was a published anthology of stories written by the program's participants. The stories were raw and powerful, full of courage and vulnerability. Lin was amazed at the depth of emotion and wisdom that flowed through the pages. Each story was a reflection of the unique journey the writer had traveled, and the healing they had experienced by simply being heard. The anthology was well received, and soon Lin found herself standing in front of a crowded auditorium at the launch event, the young writers by her side. As she spoke to the audience, her voice resonated with a calm authority. She was no longer just a woman telling her own story. She was a guide, a mentor, and a beacon of hope for those who were still finding their way. "There is power in sharing your truth," Lin said to the audience, her heart swelling with pride. "There is power in writing your own story, and there is healing in being heard." The applause was deafening, but Lin didn't need the validation. She had already found her peace. The joy she felt that night wasn't in the applause, it was in the faces of the young writers who were now seeing their stories come to life, who were now stepping into the light with their voices raised. Chapter 17. The Ripple Effect. As the years passed, Lin's foundation continued to grow, and so did her sense of purpose. Her journey had come full circle, from the girl who once resented her mother for not choosing a life of wealth to the woman who had built a life of fulfillment, love, and impact. Lin no longer sought approval from her father or anyone else. She had learned to trust her own voice, her own instincts. Her relationship with her mother, too, had evolved. Together, they had built a legacy of love, healing, and strength. Her mother had watched Lin grow from a young woman unsure of her path to someone who now shaped the lives of others. Their bond was a testament to the healing power of family, even through the most challenging times. One day, Lin found herself sitting at a park bench, reflecting on the legacy she was creating. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. A soft breeze rustled the leaves around her, and Lin felt a deep sense of peace. "I did it," she whispered to herself. "I've lived the life I was meant to live." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she looked down to see a message from one of her ments. "Thank you, Lin. You changed my life. I'm finally sharing my story with the world." Lin smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. She had always wanted to make a difference, and in that moment, she knew she had. Her life, her journey, her story, it had all led her here, to this place of purpose. And as she stood up, ready to continue her work, she knew that the story was never truly finished. It would always continue to evolve, with new chapters, new lessons, and new voices joining the chorus. Because in the end, our stories are what define us. And Lin had found the courage to write her own.